Right. So one of the things I know on your journey to getting 1 million followers, you talked about not just gaining, followers in your domestic market, but looking at emerging markets too. So how important was that in getting to that number, and how important are those markets?
It's a great question. And but let me start with how important the markets are. It depends on the business. Like if you're a mom and pop shop or you're an e-commerce company that can only ship to specific geolocations, obviously emerging markets are not going to help you at all. But I come from the entertainment industry and specifically the film industry, and 60 to 70% of box office revenue is international versus domestic. People don't realize that. You have movies now that bomb here in the US, but just absolutely kill it overseas. And then if you just look at the larger ecosystem of the biggest corporations and brands in the world, you look at like a Nike, a Coke, a Facebook, a Google, they've saturated all of the domestic markets. They've saturated Europe and what you would probably label as a tier one country, where they see the biggest growth opportunity is in emerging markets. You look at India, for example, it's going to be the world's largest population in less than 5 years. There's 1.3 billion people in the company. Now you measure that against the scale of what's in the US. I mean, it's astronomically different. So you see like Facebook, their largest demographic for both Facebook and Instagram is actually India and these emerging markets. You see Google putting hot air balloons over Africa because they realize a third of the world's population is still not connected to the internet. And you look at like a Nike or a Pepsi or an Apple or even Netflix, they said their next 100 million subscribers are coming from India. So again, it depends on the market. It can be extremely valuable for people that are looking for global scale, for global brand recognition, because there's tremendous opportunity right now because most people will look down on people in India or Indonesia and Africa and basically say they're not real people, they're not real valuable. Now, is the average value per follower or user lower than you'll get in the US? Absolutely, but the scale is there. And I can definitively tell you the opportunity that presents itself today is not going to be there 3, 4, 5 years from now because everybody's going to catch on to it. So it's really understanding the differentiation based upon your business and your industry and whether it can add value to your audience. Now, I will say that sometimes what we'll do from an e-commerce perspective or a direct response perspective is we'll push content to emerging markets to build up cheap engagement against that post. And then once we have that engagement, then we'll redirect it to our core audience. And we just see that sometimes it'll increase our overall conversion and effectiveness of it because you have that validation and credibility around that post. It's like, if you can imagine a feed, an ad being seeded to your feed and having 10 likes versus 10,000 likes. It just adds that level of credibility and validation to it. So when I was producing followers for Facebook, I was, looking at that market heavily. I tested all markets around the world. So when I built 1 million followers, I built it in 100 different countries. And I really wanted to understand the correlative impact of different content, different messages based upon geolocation and what the effectiveness of getting somebody to opt in. Because I work with a lot of Fortune 500 and 100 companies. I work with a lot of global superstars that are looking for that global exposure. And I really wanted to test and understand and learn. And that's another big thing is sometimes there's a misconception of why I generated 1 million followers. It's not to make myself famous, not to make myself an influencer, but to experiment, to learn what it takes to grow so I can share that information with other people.
So you talk about the paid aspect. Well, we talked a little bit about emerging markets, but we want to talk about a little bit about paid versus organic. So, what about how do you weigh paid versus organic following, when it comes to social?
Well, paid, some people, and I think that there's a misconception or demonizing the word paid, paid versus organic. People say, well, if it's not done organically, it's not valuable. But if you actually look at all the biggest corporations in the world, you look at a Netflix, you look at a Nike, you look at an Apple, even look at like a Taylor Swift or like biggest global superstars, like look at like The Rock and Kim Kardashian that have over 100 million followers, and people say, oh, they did it organically. No, they didn't. They have like a rock movie. The average rock movie probably spends $50 million to $100 million marketing that movie. Kim Kardashian has all the brand endorsements that are advertising, and she's on television. They advertise those TV shows. It's a different type of paid, but it gives you paid. What paid does is it gives you distribution. When you're starting from scratch, it gives you the opportunity to seed your content, your brand, to an audience that is not aware of you. Now, typically the way that I think about paid and organic when we work with our clients is, what is the level of your content creation capabilities? If you're a rock star content creator, you don't need paid. But a lot of people, are just starting out with content, or they're figuring out how to craft their message. And paid can be an amazing tool to first seed your content to certain audiences, but also to learn what messages work and what messages don't work. So we work both in the paid and organic side. With my team, I have paid specialists and I have organic specialists. And we also like to blend the mix of those two together to even drive results even further.
So if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying, and one of the things with paid is you could actually use it as a test bed to get more information quicker than from an organic perspective when you're testing content, correct?
Absolutely. It's truly amazing, especially when you look at Facebook and Instagram's advertising platform. I think is kind of the most robust when it comes to this, but it serves as a market research tool. People look at these media buying platforms as media buying tools, which they are, and they're effective at that. But to me, the more value in it is the ability to leverage it as a market research tool, to be able to test content against different audiences, different locations, different interests, different purchase behaviors. That gives you immediate data back in real time. So leveraging it from an advertising perspective, if you do it strategically, can give you so much insight to drive both your short-term and long-term content strategy and business goals, and just increase your overall chances to be successful and win.